So this is my Infinite Spitfire Landfall deck. So the main cards for the deck strategy is Yugioh, Soul of the Wild, right, to turn your creatures into lands. Grinning Ignis, which will be your land that you're going to play infinitely every turn, because you'll bounce it to your hand, play it, and when you play it, it becomes a land, a forest specifically, and it'll trigger Landfall. You can pay 1 red to bounce it back to your hand, and it gives you 2 colors and 1 red, which is how much it costs to play it in the first place. So you play it again with that mana and trigger Landfall, bounce it back to the hand, keep doing it over and again. And of course you got to be able to produce red mana every time, right? So you can do it infinitely, and that's where Lotus Cobra and Bergi, the god of storytelling, comes in. So you have 8 cards in the deck that can give you that 1 red mana you need to infinitely landfall with Grinning Ignis. So Spitfire Lagek has the ability that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is, obviously how we'll burn our opponent. We have another card that has a similar outcome, which is Valakut Exploration, which can also do your opponent damage by triggering the landfall effect multiple times. All the cards you exile with this card will deal your opponent X damage. So if you exile 20 cards with this card's effect, you can deal your opponent 20 damage, for example. So it serves pretty much the same end result, which is to deal your opponent a lot of damage with this infinite landfall loop. So let's go to the list real quick. 4 Lotus Cobra, 4 Prosperous Innkeeper, 4 Bergi, God of Storytelling, 4 Grinning Ignis, 4 Spitfire Lagek, 4 Yugioh, Soul of the Wild, 4 Valakut Exploration, 2 Colony Ambush, 2 Field Trip, 2 Burn Down the House, 2 Crack with Power, which is another one of our winning columns, 6 Mountains, 6 Forest, 4 Crag Crown Pathway, 4 Highland Forest, and 4 Rockfall Valley. So we have 24 lands, and then we have Colony Ambush, which gives you can play it as a land, so that gives us a total of 28 lands. Since that is landfall deck, might as well make sure we have more lands for that. As I already said, that the main cards for the deck's main win con, which is the Spitfire Lagek, being able to use Yugioh Soul to turn your creatures into lands, so that way you could trigger Spitfire's landfall is the main way we burn our opponent. But if we want to win with Crackle with Power, if we have 2 Lotus Cobra and Grinning Ignis and Yugioh, Soul of Wild, that's all we'll need for infinite mana. So that's how you can create infinite mana, because every time you play the Grinning Ignis, obviously become a land, which will trigger both Lotus Cobra's landfall abilities, which will allow you to create 2 red mana. Use the 1 red mana to add Grinning Ignis back to hand, and then play him again with his own effect, and just keep doing that over and keep landfalling and just keep stacking up all the red mana from the other Lotus Cobra. And you can pump it all into this. If I'm right, you need 14 mana in order to do 20 damage with this card to your opponent. You'll figure out the math of how much mana you need for that. But typically I get my opponent down to 10 life and then just pay 8 for this card, and just deal my opponent 10 damage. So that's an option. Really good card. You could potentially, instead of use Crackle with Power, you could use Light Up the Night if you want to use that card instead. But I like Crackle with Power because all I need is 8 mana in order to do 10 damage to up to 2 targets. So it serves multiple purposes. As I mentioned, Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color, and we typically add red with Lotus Cobra. Innkeeper, whenever it comes into play, create a treasure token, which we can take advantage of it to do a infinite life combo, which I'll explain soon. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life, so obviously that's part of how we get infinite life, is through this card's effect, by playing Grinning Ignis over and over and over again and gain a whole bunch of life. Then we have Bergi, God of Storytelling. We have her just for the ability that whenever you cast a spell, you get red mana. Grinning Ignis takes advantage of that red mana every time you cast them, and that's how you can get infinite. So for example, just Grinning Ignis, Bergi, God of Storytelling, and Innkeeper, just those 3 cards alone is infinite life. So let me explain the combo. So what I typically do is on turn 3, well, it depends on how the game goes. I could probably drop this on turn 2, right, and then drop this on turn 3, gain a life, and then the following turn then play this and then go off. But what I typically do is I play just to avoid losing this card, because this is where you get your life from. To avoid losing that card, what I do is I wait until turn 3 to drop this card. Then if it survives and my opponent doesn't kill it, then on my 4th turn, when I play my 4th land, and you should have 4 lands for this combo to work, 4 lands and Grinning Ignis, you tap one of your red mana sources to bounce this back to your hand, creating 3, creating the 3 mana. Since it's 2 colors and 1 red, which is enough to play Bergi, God of Storytelling. So you play her, right? You still have 3 lands available. You'll need 1 green land and 1 of anything, right? So tap the 2 sources to play Innkeeper, which means you'll have 1 land, and now you'll create a treasure token. And because of Bergi's ability, you'll get a red mana. So you have a land, red mana, and a treasure token. So use that red mana plus the treasure token and the land to play your Grinning Ignis. Once you play your Grinning Ignis, you get another red mana, and you can use that red mana to bounce Grinning Ignis back to hand. Of course, once you play Grinning Ignis the first time, after you play Innkeeper, you're gaining life, and then you bounce it to your hand because of Bergi giving you the red mana, and then you keep doing this loop over and over again and gain a whole bunch of life. So that's how you can gain infinite life on turn 4 if you get that, get those 3 cards and play it that way, and make sure you have the 4th land, because that's very important. And you can get infinite life. I've done that numerous times, and then because you have so much life, it'll be hard for your opponent to kill you, which gives you more than enough time to slowly build up your strategy of getting Ashia out there and Spitfire or Valakut exploration, and then just do the the infinite landfall loop, and then just go for game that way. As I said before, the funny thing is you can just even let's say you get 2 Valakut explorations in play. Just playing 5 lands will be enough to deal your opponent 10 damage. And if you have 8 mana source, right, whether they be land or actual or treasure tokens or whatever, right, you can pump it all into Crackle Power and do 10 damage. So as long as you do 10 at the beginning of the game, right, you can finish the game off with a Crackle Power doing 10 damage if you set it up right. So there's more than one way to win. You don't have to pull off the deck's infinite combos to win. You can obviously win without doing so. One of the things to keep in mind is you need a minimum of 2 green mana. So try to make sure you charge 2 green mana. But then after you get your 2 green, the mana should be red. So if you ever get one of these lands where you have to choose between a green land source or a red land source, choose red typically. because you want to make sure you have plenty of red in case you don't have Bergie or Lotus Cobra. You want to at least have a whole bunch of red mana source, right? To just tap a land, bounce it back, grinning to your hand, play him, and just do it that way. You know, do it the hard way. Sometimes you got to do it manually. Might not get infinite, but you get something, and that something can matter. You know, because you don't even have to beat somebody in one turn. You can beat them in like 2 turns. Because if you have 5 mana, right, and let's say you have Spitfire, you have Grinning Ignis, and you have Asha in play, well, with 5 red mana, you can play this 5 times and at least do 5 damage. Then do it again next turn, right? Untap all your lands, tap them all over again, and just, you know, start the loop, you know, start the strategy all over again. So you don't gotta go infinite, right, to do damage and to win. You know, every bit of damage counts, so that's something to keep in mind. Because some people will be like focusing on trying to get all the pieces together, when sometimes just a couple pieces is enough to do something. You know, it's like for the ultimate strategy, obviously you want all the pieces together for the ultimate strategy. But, you know, just make the best use of, you know, these cards. You know, most of these cards got, you know, there'll be times where I'll do a lot of chip damage just with Innkeeper alone, or Lotus Cobra does have 2 power. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes my opponent doesn't block, they'll take the hits, and that's good, and I'll take advantage of it. And as soon as I get them down to 10 and I have 8 mana sources, bang, crackle with power for game. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes that's just all I need. Sometimes just Ashia, Soul of the Wild, with a burn down the house is enough to win me the game, because this will be strong enough that once I burn down the house to clear my opponent's board, I could just swing with Ashia for game just by attacking with it being strong, right? Because I have a lot of lands and this one card. So, you know, sometimes you just gotta play the game in the most basic way, but that most basic way is all you need, right? It'd be rare for you just to only have Valakut Exploration in play and just using only it as your main source of damage and win con, but it's possible. You could end up in that situation. I mean, think about how weird it'd be for you to have this in play, have Ashia in play, and all you're doing is like you're just drawing like your Innkeepers and your Lotus Cobras, and that's it. And it's like, and lands, and it's like, damn, I'm not drawing any of the other cards that can go infinite. Right? I'm just drawing, you know, the basic, you know, low cost battle card, I mean creatures, right, and lands, and I got Valakut Exploration. Well, make the make the best use out of it, right? Let's see. So all these effects are pretty much simple, self-explanatory. Ashia, Soul of the Wild, power and toughness is equal to all your lands. It turns all your non-token creatures into lands. So it turns itself into a forest, and it turns all your other creatures into a forest. And of course they can tap for green mana, so keep that in mind. Sometimes that comes in handy. Sometimes what I'll have is my opponent down to 10 life, right, and I have Ashia in play with, you know, a couple creatures and, you know, and lands, and I'm like, all right, I could tap my creatures, create, you know, mana, and then tap my lands, and create 8 mana, and that's enough for crackle power. One time I doubled bounce Grinning Ignis to my hand to create 6 mana, and then tapped. What I did first was tap each Grinning Ignis to create green mana, because, you know, I had Ashia in play, right? So I could get 2 green mana, then tap my red mana sources to bounce the Grinning Ignises to my hand. So that way I would have 8 mana altogether, just off of 2 Grinning Ignises and 2 red mana sources. And I was able to create 8 mana source, right? 8 mana, which was enough for Crackle with power. But I didn't just put all 8. I had that 8 plus the extra that I needed. 11 mana does 15 damage. So a total of 11 mana I was able to produce with that strategy, and I was able to do 15 damage to my opponent. My opponent had 16 life. I dealt them 15. They still have 1 life left, but because Valakut Exploration was in play, and I played a land that turn, if I'm right, so I was able to trigger this card's Landfall, and then that was able to deal my opponent 1 damage to finish them off, so a total of 16 damage that turn. So there's that. The other thing, this doesn't just exile cards from, like, so let me read the effect. Landfall: whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card as long as it remains exiled, but at the end of your turn, or at the end of the end step, that means even if you could apply this on your opponent's turn, but typically you only do this on your turn. At the end, the beginning of your end step, if there are cards exiled with Valakut Exploration, put them into their owner's graveyard. Then Valakut Exploration deals that much damage to each opponent. So I could just imagine combining this with Evolving Wilds and triggering its effect twice, right? Double Landfall. I've done that before. I've played a land and then field trip and played another land and got the Valakut Exploration twice, and I was able to play something. Then we got Colony Ambush. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. That comes in handy, especially with Asha, easily getting really strong. It makes it for a great kill card, especially when you can like you drop Asha, right? It'll be strong, and if you already have creatures in play, you can tap those creatures, to produce the green mana necessary to play this, and then play this, targeting your Asha, and deal damage to your opponent. So there's synergy there, and be able to kill whatever threat you want to kill, which usually that's a big deal, being able to kill something strong. Especially nowadays, people will be making really strong creatures, so sometimes burn down the house is not enough. So that's where that comes into play. Plus it could be played as land, so sometimes you might not have drawn a land and you have this in play, so use it. It's always nice. I like these are really good cards, the cards that could be used as land when you need them, and vice versa. Then we have field trip. Of course, search your deck for a basic forest, and then put it into play, tapped, and then shuffle your library, and then learn. And then we have our sideboard. The first thing I go for is experimental sciences, so I can search for another basic land like a mountain or something. Gotta get that red mana, right? And then gain 2 life, which is always useful. There are other options like Introduction to Annihilation. Definitely comes in handy in certain situations. A lot of times, there's things you need to get rid of, and you don't always have what you need to get rid of something, but you can get something to get rid of something, right? So you can use Field Trip to go get you a kill spell, and then go kill something, right, that's causing you problems. Burn down the house. It's our deck's board wipe. Deal 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So that's very useful. So there's some planeswalker hate in there, so that's always useful. And then you also could choose, instead of the board wipe, is to create 3/1/1 red devil creature tokens with the effect that when the creature dies, deal 1 damage to any target, and they gain haste until end of turn. So you could attack with them the same turn you play them. There'll be times where I use these as a wall, play them and use them to take hits, so I don't, so I can stall and try to get extra turns. Especially if I'm trying to get to like 8 mana, so I can play my Crack Wolf with power and go for game. A lot of times I will use the tokens to help me, kill certain specific problematic creatures. You can use all 3 tokens to block 1 creature, deal the creature 3 damage, right? and then because all your creatures, your tokens died, trigger all their effects and target that same creature and deal 3 more damage. So you could take down a creature that has 6 toughness. I've used this before to take down something that had like first strike or something. Like it was like a 3/1 with first strike. So since it had 1 toughness, but because it has first strike, it'll be hard for you to deal it 1 damage with an attack. So of course I use the tokens. Tokens die from the first strike, trigger the effect to deal the damage to the my opponent's creature and kill it. So that's how I've dealt with some of those type of problematic cards. I sometimes, you know, use this on something that might have death touch or something. Like I'll use the tokens to block something that has death touch, you know, kamikaze with it, and then use the 1 damage to kill something else. It just depends on how you use it. You know, I've been creative with the card. And then Crackle with Power for 5 mana, which means you put 1 in each of those X's plus 2 red. You could do 5 damage to any target. If you put 2 mana in each of those X's and then 2 red, you can do 10 damage to up to 2 targets. So I usually target my opponent and 1 of their creatures, or in one situation I targeted 2 creatures with this effect and kill both creatures by dealing them 10 damage each, because their toughness were like at 8 at the time. So I was like, oh, gotta kill them before they get too strong. So that was a thing. So if you use this right, it could be a board wipe. If you have enough mana, you could definitely clear a board with this. But you know, with enough mana, you could just kill your opponent, which is more important. And I try to make sure that all the mana sources don't come into play tap. You only have 4 lands in the deck that does come into play tap. Typically you want to play this turn 1, obviously, and then after that you just play all your lands. This doesn't you know, doesn't come into play tap if it's after turn 2, so that's always good. But Highland Forest is the only one that does come into play tap, so keep that in mind. But fortunately for me, sometimes I will have Lotus Cobra in play when I play this late game, so it's not that big of a deal because at least I still get the mana source from it, and then I can just go and tap and pay for whatever I need to pay for. Not much else to say. Yeah, not much to say. There's already some gameplay, so you can see some of the stuff in action, see the cards in action, see what they can do, and that's the end of the video.